I hope you're all as excited as I am that I have new equipment and my videos don't look really shoddy and I'm not forced to use a phone. Something I wanted to talk about were the developmental archetypes for this first venture. They're very important. They're more than just an archetyping system where you can be this archetype, embrace it, and move on with your life. These archetypes are designed in a lot of ways to heal, to get past the past. I call them the developmental archetypes because they're core aspects of development that we're missing because science, I'm not sure why, over many years, there are some psychologists that went into the anima and the animus, and forgive me if I'm forgetting the psychologist's name to give them credit. But I'm sure you could look it up and tie it in. But these aren't quite the same as my version of understanding the two sides of the mind as the masculine and the feminine, or the yin and the yang. And so there are some core traits on either side that people are supposed to develop. They're supposed to go through these and understand these through a measure of emulation growing up. It can't always just be a process of us researching and understanding what an ideal man is like or what an ideal feminine woman is like, and just to go and do those things. I actually believe that emulation's a pretty big precursor, as I myself over the years have tried very hard just to embrace these things on a psychological level without any help. And so I went and sought out people. I went and observed them and in a lot of ways integrating the masculine and the feminine. And so I've been, since discovering that and healing myself and balancing out, I've been trying to share that with others. So one way I can share that with all of you today is to help inspire you to understand them more so you can move on and find the right examples. So we'll start off with the basics. So there are 5 core archetypes, okay? So there is the manifestor, which is the man seeking the masculine. Then there is the forger, who is the man seeking the feminine. And then there is the baby girl, who is the woman seeking the masculine. And finally, the warrioress, who is the woman seeking the feminine. Not to say, actually, it's not the last one, but the last one is actually called the balanced archetype. That one's separate and almost completely different. So these 4 core main core archetypes are intended to help us observe and look at ourselves to understand where we're lacking, but at the same time to observe our great strengths. But the lacking part would be our weaknesses. And so where we lack, we can fill that cup, essentially, and that's the goal. And so the manifestor, as an example, because he has so much more feminine development than he does masculine development, he could be maybe potentially more prone to lying and deception. It's not to say that every manifestor is like this, because they might have a good moral or ethical standing. They might have found religion, or maybe their mother had a really good moral compass, so they constantly want to be like their mom and they don't lie. But they might feel themselves very challenged to essentially not lie. The manifestors also can be very good at manifesting. They can essentially almost live a life like they're telling a story, like they're praying and just hoping for something to happen, and the wild thing just happens. I would say the vast majority of the creators of the world, the men who create comedy as an example, would likely be more of a manifestor because they need the feminine energy to do that. It's not to say that forgers can't, but for a forger to try to outpace a manifestor in the world of creation would be very difficult to do, though some people are outliers for sure. But yeah, so the manifestor oftentimes goes into creativity, to deeper creativity, or they can go into being a healer. And as well, the forger, on the other end, he's going to oftentimes seek creativity. He might become like a DJ. He might do art. He might try to become a healer. But like I was saying before, he might go at a much slower pace than the manifestor could because there's lacking of female development. And he oftentimes, though, tends to be just better among men in competition with them. He may even be really good at fights. Like for my core archetype, what I started off as was the manifestor. And so I, in my life, would be a little more challenged to potentially win in a fight, like a physical fight against a forger. It's kind of hard because I believe there are manifestors in like the MMA, the UFC, all that, or boxing, but they would potentially have a more steeper climb or a steeper climb to get to success than the forgers. The forgers are very much in the physical world. And so forger men, oftentimes, like in relationships, they can oftentimes be really stoic, or they struggle with deeper emotional connection. And so if you were to try to speak to them at length due to some like kind of problem that you have in your life, and you expect them to hear you out and to empathize with you, they may really struggle with this concept. It can be very hard for them to do. It's not to say that manifestors can't do this either. There are plenty of manifestors who had a mother who failed them in this area, and they didn't effectively draw on that skill or develop it. So that's why it's important to understand the archetypes more aligned with, like, if someone has more feminine development or more masculine development, because it's not to say that you're going to have all of the traits of a common manifestor. You, as a man, if you feel you are one, you might have maybe a good amount of masculinity. Like now, for me, I'm becoming more and more balanced. I'm still a manifestor, but I'm far more developed. I developed quite a lot of masculinity through a lot of escapades in my life and through metabolic changes. And that's for a different time to explain. But I do go over it in my book if you guys are interested. So for the females, the baby girl is going to be more of a gal who can be really expressive to the point that her vulnerability can take her to places maybe like OnlyFans as an extreme example. It's not to say that a warrior ass can't do OnlyFans, but the baby girl is going to be more capable of deep vulnerability like that and have a lot less boundaries, and to also be a lot more expansive in her thinking in terms of like what her beliefs are, because largely it takes a specific belief set to go and do something like that. I'm not judging people who do. I understand all the baby girls, and I forgive them for all the things they do. They're a little chaotic, just like the manifestor. I understand it. The manifestor and the baby girls, they often have this kind of campaign to do bad things subconsciously, hoping that the father will come and reprimand them. It's an interesting concept. So the baby girl oftentimes is so feminine that she attracts all kinds of men, both manifestor, forger, balanced. She's pervasive in that way. She's got very strong feminine receptive energy. She just pulls them in. But oftentimes she's not kept because she doesn't have the masculine integration that the warrioress has. She doesn't get that respect. And so on the warrioress end, she's often respected, but she's challenged with being loved because, well, it's not every warrioress. There's a lot of warrioress women who are well loved, but it can be very challenging for the warrioress to be vulnerable, as the baby girl is. Common traits of a warrioress is that they're not vulnerable. They very much struggle with opening up and everything like that. Now, when it comes to their work abilities, they're, in a lot of ways, they can outpace many men, especially in managerial roles, because a lot of managerial roles today kind of look for more of a patient, understanding manager who's a lot less iron-fisted.
the warrioress can come in with like just enough of the iron fist and of the empathy and kindness and sweetness to be able to keep a good managerial personality. Though I argue this can be complicated for her health. That's a different subject for another time. But ultimately, the warrioress is very effective in the workplace. She's challenged in personal relationships. Oftentimes, I see warrioress women go well into the 40s or 50s without having kids, or if they do have kids, they're separated. They very much have a difficult time, especially if they have a really great father, finding a good potential mate. And so, yeah. So that's the four core archetypes in a nutshell. The balanced archetype would basically be able to use both the feminine and masculine sides of the mind with great ease. You'll be able to notice them pretty quickly once you start speaking to them. For me, in person, I can typically notice a baby girl or any of the four of them just by how people walk and talk and how they gesture, how they hold themselves as a whole, what their facial structure is like. But when it comes to the balanced archetypes, it's a little more challenging to do. I usually have to spend time talking to them to really notice, because some people can be pretty, like some manifestors, as an example, like me as an example, I can be really developed and present very masculine and balanced, but like I'm still fairly a little bit manifestor. So anyway, that's the archetypes in a basic way of understanding it. There's a lot of nuance to each and how they should live their lives ideally, and the kind of people they should pair up with romantically, and the kind of people they need to seek to heal. And so my company, Polarity Health, I designed it in a way that I can bring in the right coaches and train them, as well as myself, to be able to help people integrate very fast. I've actually managed to create a framework that works within 3 to 9 month periods. Some people might take longer than that. They're a little more slow paced, and that's fine. But yeah, it's become very effective over the last few years, and I'm really excited to get that all out. So get ready for the rebrand. The website will be coming out here soon, and the Polarity quiz. So that quiz will reveal in a lot of ways what archetype you might have and where you might need to work on things for development. And also, to close everything out, I want everyone to understand that one of the most important things for relationships is to have a nearly balanced development. Because if you're a baby girl who's in the extreme land of baby girlness, you're going to really struggle with things like mental cheating, potentially. Not all of them. Some develop good boundaries. Or maybe their astrology sign is something of a unique aspect that makes it so they're more loyal. But yeah, you can struggle with just being able to hold your ground if your kids are being hurt by someone, and that can be bad. The manifestor, you can end up lying and deceiving and lose the trust and respect of your partner, and then it's just all out the door. The forger, you can end up steamrolling a baby girl. You can really hurt her. You would maybe just need a warrioress sometimes because you're, so high octane in the masculine. You need that balancing act. An example might be Alex and Layla Hormozy. Those two are, I believe, are warrioress and forger combo, like a real power couple. And then, with the warrioress, she can seem like the most perfect Wonder Woman-like person out in the real world, but then in a relationship, she can lose control of her mind due to one trigger that she hit, or maybe she just cannot emotionally regulate enough to be able to have a really in-depth, loving, deep relationship. There's likely a situation of inconsistency there. So anyway, that's the gist, guys. Subscribe if you're new and you're super interested in these kinds of things. I'd like to see you here. You can more than welcome to comment too. All right.